You're listening to the Visible Expert Podcast, where we share stories, research, and actionable insights to help B2B marketers and practitioners drive extraordinary growth in their professional lives. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Visible Expert Podcast. I'm John Tyreman, and Kelly is out of town this week, and we'll be back with... So we've got a little break in our interview schedule. We'll be back with a new guest next week. We're going to try out a new format. We've got some actionable advice on how to engage with your audience and build your brand as an expert. And I'm joined today with my friend and colleague, Austin McNair. Austin, how you doing?
I'm doing well, John. Thanks for having me on. Gotta say, honored to be here on the Visible Expert Podcast.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks, man. Hey, I don't think people out there in listener land know exactly how much work goes into producing these episodes, but man, Rand Fishkin, Mark Schaefer, you've had some pretty incredible guests, man. You guys are off to a hot start.
We are off to a hot start, yeah, and we've got some great feedback from our listeners. Thank you to Mark Regal, John Moore, and Michael Haynes for the kind words. We appreciate your support. Michael actually included our show in his top B2B podcasts to listen to. So, Michael, we put that link in the show notes. Go check out Michael's write-up. But, yeah, to your point, it does take a lot of work to put these podcasts up. And it's funny. When we were planning this, it was, let's have it come out every Monday morning so that it's fresh for the week. And little did I know that, okay, that means I got to work on the weekends to get this stuff up.
Yeah, man.
But it's okay. I love it.
Hey, I mean, anyone out there that's thinking about including podcasts as part of their marketing strategy, just know that one of the things that you have to be ready to do is research those people that you're interviewing, because you don't want to bring someone like Mark Schaefer on your podcast and ask him a bunch of the same questions that he's answered over and over again. And I got to say, you guys have done a really good job of getting some of these folks to open up and to answer questions that, man, I wasn't expecting you guys to ask. So it's really good, man. So just congratulations. We can stop bragging too much, about you. Kelly's not here. Don't tell. We'll see if Kelly listens to the podcast. See, we won't let him know that I'm gushing over you guys. But good job.
Thank you. Yeah, and even though Kelly's out of town, you'll still be able to hear him on the podcast. He did a few webinars before, and we pulled some of his thoughts on artificial intelligence and account-based marketing and how you can use those to engage with your audience. So that's what this episode is all about. It's all about you, the expert, and engaging with your audience and really connecting with them, because that's what marketing is all about today. So if you too find our show valuable, please rate, review, and subscribe to the show. You can do that in Apple Podcasts by typing in Visible Expert Podcast into the search bar, clicking on the show, scrolling down to where you can leave a rating and review, and we really appreciate that. That helps our podcast get known. All right, so let's go over an outline for today's show. Let's go over what the topics are. So we touched on it a little bit. Even though Kelly's out on vacation, you'll still hear about his perspective on AI and account-based marketing and B2B and more. We'll also hear from our managing partner, Lee Fredrickson, and how you can still passively engage with your audience on your website and social media. And Austin, you recently wrote an article titled The 2 Evergreen Rules of Social Media. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on how, in the ever-changing world of social media, what are those 2 evergreen rules? And then finally, since webinars seem to be the hot topic as of late, I wrote an article. It's called A B2B Marketer's Field Guide to Webinars. And Austin, since you produce the webinars here at Hinge, you kind of lead that charge for us. We're doing 2 a month, which is kind of insane right now, but we're doing it.
maybe I'll share a couple of my sob stories of when things have gone wrong. But overall, like I said, happy to be here, happy to make a contribution and hopefully provide some valuable insights to some people that are out there trying to build their expertise.
Absolutely, and so I hope that you find value from this podcast and take away some tips on how you can engage with your audience. As always, this episode is sponsored by the Hinge Research Institute. If you're involved in marketing demand or lead generation and want to use a data-driven approach to content strategy, consider using Original Research. The Hinge Research Institute offers a range of services from tiered sponsorships of original studies to custom research on specific industry challenges. We found that high-growth professional services firms are 3 times more likely than no-growth firms to using original research in their content strategy. And, according to Forbes, companies who adopt a data-driven approach to marketing are 6 times more likely to be profitable year over year. If you're interested in learning more, email us at research@hingemarketing.com and we'll find the right approach to using research for you.
What a great read, John. Excellent stuff. Do people know, like, when you read that, the Hinge Research Institute, that you and Kelly are part of the Hinge Research Institute? So if you like the podcast, you like Kelly and John, you're going to be working with Kelly and John.
That's right. No, that's a good point, Austin. I don't know that our listeners really know that. Yeah, Kelly and I are really actively involved in the Hinge Research Institute. So, if you like working with us or want to work with us, hit us up. Okay, so let's dive into some of the webinar segments that we pulled, and I picked these segments because I think that they're good examples of tactics that you, the experts, can use to engage more with your audience. And first, let's start with Kelly's thoughts on account-based marketing, which is really a way for you to leverage your existing accounts and nurture those and grow those. But it's also a way for you to target accounts that you want to pursue, and sell into those accounts in a strategic way. So that's really kind of the high-level overview of what account-based marketing is, and we'll let Kelly explain that in this clip.
Let's dive in.
Here we go.
I think ABM is now, obviously reaching the next version of its life. So, I've been in ABM for many years now, and a lot of it, I saw people dipping their toe in the water or talking about it a lot. But it's just recently that I'm starting to see more and more organizations invest money into ABM. And I think part of it is those reasons that I gave at the beginning of this webinar is people are frustrated with the normal channels that they're using. So their emails are not as effective as they once were. Going to trade shows or conferences is becoming more and more of an expensive proposition, and your targeted buyer may or may not be there. And even if they're there, are they stopping by your booth? So that's a big expense right there. You may have an SDR team or outbound sales team or something like that. You may be finding that they have to make more and more dials to reach a buyer, or let alone a prospect to talk to. A lot of people, more and more people are screening their calls or not returning their calls. A lot of times, even if you've got a compelling message that you're leaving on voicemail, they're not returning those. So those are just like some of the ways that people are frustrated of, how do I reach that hard to reach buyer? A lot of times, depending on your product or service, you're trying to reach someone at a CXO level, and they're hard to reach. And on top of that, depending on the product you're selling, there's a lot of research out there by Gartner and Serious Decisions and other organizations out there that talk about the amount of people involved in the buying decision is really growing. So you may know of 3 people that are involved in the decision-making process. Maybe 2 of them are decision makers. One of them is an influencer or champion, but you may not realize that there are 4 other people that are influencers as well in the decision, and you're not reaching them today. So that's kind of where account-based marketing comes into play, is that you go in and you really segment and target the accounts and contacts that you go after, and you really map out the accounts, and you've done your research to figure that these types of accounts are the ones that are going to give you higher lifetime value, that are going to make larger purchases with you, things like that. And the thing that I always come back to that I've seen over the last couple of years is this research data point from ITSMA where it says 87% of marketers that measure ROI say ABM outperforms every other marketing investment. So to me, that's pretty compelling evidence that it should be in your marketing bag of tricks. You've got to invest the time, and as John said earlier, you've got to have a strategy to drive that. I've seen too many people jump right into ABM and they go to campaign execution, and then they're frustrated when it doesn't work because they haven't put the time into building out a strategy and figuring out what the goals are, setting up realistic expectations and everything else. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about with ABM is you don't have to use ABM just for new prospects. So more and more companies, I just read a guide that came out from Engagio that talks about using ABM for cross-selling and upselling. And it's kind of a no-brainer that if you already have an existing customer, it's much cheaper to reach out to that customer and get them to buy more than it is to invest a lot of time and effort into going after, a new account and maybe winning it or maybe not winning it. But ABM, can definitely help you with lower costs, going after those existing customers. In many cases, it takes a lot less time to close the deal. Obviously, you're improving the lifetime value of that customer. And as we touched on with some of these other spices, it provides a better customer experience. Mm-hmm. And that's what's really important is, mapping everything back to that customer journey or that customer experience.
That was a fun webinar to do with Kelly. The spices. You remember that one?
I do. The spicy webinar. That was excellent, and kind of follows the trend of kind of what we're doing in this podcast episode right now, looking at these trends that we see out there in mm-hmm. professional services marketing that visible experts are using to build that visibility out there.
That's right. Yeah, and so this next clip, we have Lee Fredrickson, our managing partner here. He wrote the book, The Visible Expert, and he talks about, so how do you measure your visible expertise? He talks about creating an index, and what he means by that is looking at what are the statistics or what are the metrics that contribute to both your visibility and what are the metrics that contribute to your expertise, and then finding a way to measure both of those either together in some sort of way, in some sort of calculation, or separately to be able to measure your progress on becoming a visible expert. So here's Lee's thoughts on that and how your website can actually act and your blog can actually act as a way to engage with your audience in more of a passive sense. So you create the content for your website, you create the content for your blogs, and that's really what your audience is engaging with at that point in their buyer's journey. So here's Lee and his thoughts on that.
As a professional services marketer, if you look at what drives your brand and what drives the inbound leads and so forth, it's generally a combination of two things. One is what your reputation is, what you're known for, which kind of expertise, what are the things that you do well, and how visible is that? How widely is that known? Is it just your clients that know that, or is it the whole marketplace that knows that? So if you think of visibility and expertise as being the two things you need to increase to be more successful in the marketplace, well, probably the single best indicator of visibility is your website traffic. And why is that? Well, we know that 90% of the time that people are reviewing something, they're going to Google it. So if you're getting more traffic to your website, more overall traffic, that's an indicator you have higher visibility. If people hear about you or get referred to you, what do? They Google you, or they go to your website, or they check it out. Now, they may also do social media, so you can make a little bit more sophisticated indicator by having web traffic and getting a measure of social media exposure. Or you can, there are other things you can do to build up a little index, but that's something that's generated automatically, easy to track, and you don't have to have someone writing down or making notes of the paper to know whether you're making progress. Another thing is, if you flip it over and you look at blog traffic, well, why do we care about blog traffic as a subset of that? It's because on your blog, that's where you're demonstrating what your expertise is, how you can solve problems. So the more traffic you have to your blog, the more you're going to get across your expertise. You can also, again, you can make that more sophisticated by developing an index that takes into account blog traffic and downloads of premium content. And you can then track, are we going up? Are we level? Is it trailing off? Are we making progress on visibility and expertise? So there you have two high-level concepts, both of which you can track at least directionally with embedded measures that are easily obtained and easily followed.
So, Austin, what do you think of what Lee had to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything he said is spot on. I mean, this is probably stuff that we've heard before, but it's undeniable the role that your website plays and the role that your content plays as you're trying to increase your visibility in the marketplace. And I think what Lee brings to the table there is, we have to track what we're doing, and we have to track results. And a lot of times I personally get hung up on the tracking aspect sometimes, and I think that you can follow Lee's advice there and just develop this simple index of tracking not just traffic but also engagement with your content. And that's right. That you want to see that growing, you want to see that continuing to increase. So it's undeniable. I think everything that he said there is spot on.
No, I think Lee does bring up a good point with customizing a specific index that's tailored to you, the expert, in your activities in the marketplace.
Yeah, it's great.
So, all right, so that was our clip from Lee, and talking about website traffic, talking about blog traffic. And this next clip, we're actually going to go back to Kelly Waffle here, and he takes it a step further, and he talks about how artificial intelligence, you can use artificial intelligence to create dynamic content on your website. His thoughts on that are really great. This is something that I'm hearing from. It's a bit advanced, so don't get overwhelmed. But
this is the deep end, folks, and I'm in there with you.
But no, it's a great way. I mean, artificial intelligence is the future, and it can seem a bit creepy, I guess. But no, I think it's a great way to engage with your audience in an optimal way. So here's Kelly's thoughts on leveraging artificial intelligence in your marketing.
To me, artificial intelligence, as John was saying, is really using that technology, but it's turning data that you have into insights. That's the real key to artificial intelligence and where the payoff is. And I asked a number of people how and where they're using artificial intelligence today. And some of the responses I got were that they're using it a lot around digital advertising to help them improve the reach and the efficiency of digital advertising. So that's one area you may want to consider if you're doing a lot of digital advertising and you want to get a little bit tighter with your targeting and things like that. Another area is really overall identifying the right accounts and contacts to target. So, as marketers, we tend to want to go after everybody. We think, our products and services have a great fit with everyone, but that's not really the case. So the more you can get very specific in the audience that you're trying to reach with the specific messaging, the better off you're going to be. And this is certainly an area where artificial intelligence can help out. I'm seeing a lot myself around personalized websites in real time. So you're seeing more of that where people go to websites and the website actually changes its content, its dynamic to fit the profile of the person coming to the website. Another area, obviously where people are using it is really around capturing intent signals from accounts. So as you're watching the overall process, AI can help you see the behaviors that are occurring and then help you to adapt what you're doing and what offers and content you're pushing out to those people along that journey or that customer experience. Finally, an area that I think would really people will really benefit from AI is around SEO. So SEO can be really tedious as far as all the steps that you have to go through and all that. And the more that AI gets involved with SEO, I think you're going to find that it's going to really make those processes more effective, more efficient, and quicker overall, and enable people to use their time better around SEO instead of doing these menial and mundane tasks that are required right now with SEO.
I thought one thing that you said was interesting, Kelly, about the dynamic content on websites. So would an example of that be, let's say I'm searching from Washington, D.C., and I go onto a website, and it's a service that I'm looking at or evaluating, and they say on their website, and we serve Washington, D.C. Would that be an example of artificial intelligence knowing that I'm searching from that specific location?
Yeah, and a lot of times the artificial intelligence can pick up off of IP addresses and things like that to see, what kind of company you are. And then based on that, it may serve you up a telecommunications message, or it may serve up, some other kind of services message. And the nice part about the dynamic content is really it can change up the offers, it can change up the graphics, it can change up the body copy. There are a lot of variables involved there. And a big part of all this, like I said in the beginning, where it was cold and impersonal, here's an opportunity for you to kind of warm that up, spice it up a little bit, get it a little bit more friendly and personal than ways that you've done it before.
Interesting. How would you rate that on the spicy scale?
I'd give that 3 chili peppers. But I did want to talk a little bit more around, artificial intelligence is exciting. It is spicy. It is hot. You'll see a lot of buzz around it right now, but there's still a lot of barriers around it. So I know a lot of people are concerned about the cost of the technology. Mm-hmm. I've been reading a lot where a lot of organizations, even though they buy into the idea of artificial intelligence, they find that their staff doesn't have the right training or the right skills to really take advantage of artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely a key consideration that you'll want to look at before you go down this road. A lot of people, just like I've seen over time with account-based marketing and marketing automation back in the day, is a lot of people say, yeah, but, and they don't know where to start. They like the idea at the 50,000 foot view, mm-hmm. but actually getting down to execution and implementation, they don't know where to start. So that's a big barrier for people to go deeper into artificial intelligence. And then there's still a lot of complexity there with artificial intelligence, and you'll find that a lot of people have a hard time trying to integrate it with existing technology and platforms that they already have. So, that can be a head scratcher for a lot of people, and because of that, they decide to push it off for a little bit longer.
I think that's an important point that we need to caveat all of these trends with, is that you shouldn't just go out and do these things just to do them. You've got to have a strategy behind it. And I think that's probably something that, these people that are in the trenches who are executing, if they don't have the strategy in place, that's a huge roadblock to implementing these trends.
Amen, John. You're preaching to the choir.
That's right.
And, my closing thought around artificial intelligence, I saw a quote from Demandbase, which I thought pretty much summed up where we are as far as how hot it is and all that, is 80% of all marketing executives predict artificial intelligence will revolutionize marketing by the year 2020. Yet only 10% are currently using it. So that pretty much shows you where we are with this right now. But it is definitely a hot trend, something that you should look at. Give it some consideration. Maybe it's not in your playbook for today, but again, like John said, you got to have a strategy and you've got to prepare for tomorrow today. So AI is definitely one of our 7 spices.
So Austin, what do you think about that?
What did I think about that? Well, Kelly certainly knows his stuff when it comes to all these tools that are out there and the emerging trends that are coming. And, what I can say about AI, what I can say about just different marketing automation tools in general is, I would generally recommend we start slow and we test things out. Mm-hmm. I mean, a big theme of what we're talking about today is about making good, real, meaningful impressions on people. So just dumping in some sort of AI or some sort of marketing automation tool into your marketing mix without testing it with your audience first, I think it could present a real risk. And I would recommend, testing it, starting slow, and just in all the things that you're doing, make sure that you're making good human impressions on people.
Speaking of human, do you think that would come across as sort of creepy? If you knew that you were visiting a website and it served up content, hey, Austin, or it said your name on the page, or it said where you're from.
I don't think so. I as a marketer, and we're in this business, and I think a lot of people listening might be in the marketing business as well. We know about these tools, and sometimes I think that comes to mind as are we creeping people out and stuff. But in general, I think audiences aren't really paying attention to that. Instead, they appreciate the personalization that can come from a lot of these tools. I think we all know now that Google is listening to us and that Facebook is tracking us
right now.
Yeah, so we got to be careful what we say, to our technology overlords. But no, in all seriousness, I think that if it's done tastefully, if it's done in an appropriate manner, limited to things that your buyers might care about. I mean, everybody cares about personalization and being heard and being seen as an individual.
That's right.
So if I visit a website and it knows, hey, you're in the Washington, D.C. area, you might be interested in these different things, that means a lot. It makes my job a lot easier. And as someone who's searching online specifically, I want my search to be an easy search. I'm not looking for hard searches. So if a computer's going to help do that for me and for the firm, it's a win-win.
Yeah, I agree. And we were talking, a few of our experts talk about the importance of being human and being authentic. And that's a trend that we're seeing. And you wrote an article recently titled The 2 Evergreen Rules of Social Media. And we'll put that link in the show notes. Can you tell us what are these 2 rules, and in the ever-changing world of social media, how could they be evergreen? Right.
Thanks for plugging my article. It means a lot to me. It's fun. Just a small peek behind the curtain here at Hinge. We're always thinking about what can we write about. What kind of we've been writing on marketing and professional services for years now. So it's when it comes to writing new articles, we got to be selective and make sure we're not repeating ourselves too much. And so, thinking about B2B social media, I was presented with this challenge. Well, what in the world am I going to write about? What am I bringing to this space in an article that isn't already out there 1,000 times? And I'm not sure I accomplished that goal. A lot of this stuff is out there, but I wanted to, instead of focusing on different trends or different techniques that are out there regarding social media, I kind of just put myself in the shoes of all the people out there who are managing these social media accounts. And on a day-to-day basis, they got to put some content out there for their firm. And it's always a question, well, what are we going to do today? And how are we going to evolve our strategy? And so as I was writing the article, I'm thinking, well, what is evergreen? What isn't going to go away in social media? Because social media is changing constantly. I mean, the different lists of, the endless features that you can do now, they're always changing. They're always removing things. So what's evergreen? And so I came up with 2 rules. One is be human, and the second one is be helpful. And if you want, we can walk through those and talk about what I mean.
Yeah, what do you mean by be human? What does it mean to humanize your personal brand or your firm's brand?
Sure, yeah. So, and in the article, I give credit to a friend of the podcast, Mark Schaefer, whose book has been influential for us here at Hinge. But when I was thinking about being human, I think it's all too often, especially when we're operating as ourselves on social media through our LinkedIn accounts and the like. I think it's all too easy for us to just check the boxes, right? Mm-hmm. Your firm just released a new white paper. You throw it up on your LinkedIn. You check the box. Hey, you can tell everybody in your office that you did your job. You shared the white paper.
Hey, I did my part. I promoted it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just all too easy to do the basics. And generally, what I've seen in that is there's not a whole lot of engagement, right? Because people know kind of what's going on. You're just sharing things to share things. You're not sharing them because you care about it.
Right.
And I think at the end of the day, social media is no different than real life. Like, people can tell when you're being authentic, and they can tell when you're just checking a box. I think back to days in previous jobs that I had where networking in person was a big deal, and it was something I would do from time to time. And you'd go to these different Rotary Club meetings or Civic Association meetings. You're talking about maybe your business, you're talking about an issue in the community, and there's always that one person that's going around with the stack of business cards, and they come up to you, and before you can even introduce and get their name, they're already laying you with their elevator pitch, and it's just like, man, can you just stop? No one is interested in that.
And then he goes back and says, I handed out 20 business cards or 50 business cards.
Exactly. And that's generally not a strategy that works in real life. And so why would we expect that to work on social media either? It kind of blows my mind. You see people just, like I said, checking the boxes, just sharing kind of generic posts, always sharing about themselves, instead of really, opening up and being interested. I think about this book I read years ago too, very famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And
I've heard of that one. Yeah.
The whole premise of that book that he talks about is, and this was written a long time ago, so it was true back then. It's true now. You have to authentically be interested in what other people have going on in their lives if you expect people to be interested in you. And that's a really big deal. I think that if you just operate on social media as somebody's always talking about yourself, always talking about your business, and just, like I said, checking those boxes, people are going to ignore you, and rightfully so.
Yeah, I can tell when people are being disingenuous on social media, and I can tell when people are really trying to connect and really trying to help out. So, no, I think that's great, and if you're listening to this and you want to check out Austin's post, go to the hingemarketing.com, go to our blog, and you can even type in the search bar there. The article is The 2 Evergreen Rules of Social Media. So check that out. Tell Austin what you think.
And I'll say one more thing, John, just about the human aspect of this, because I talked a lot there about individuals, acting as themselves on social media. From the firm side, if you're managing a company page, this still applies. You want to make sure that if you're sharing an article, maybe tag the person who wrote the article in the post as well. I see this all the time where firms are sharing all this great content, but they're not attributing it back to the author. They're not attributing it back to the human that actually put this stuff together. And I think that that's a big miss because, again, it's people that are going to be connected to that individual that are really going to care about what they wrote. And I think it does, the firm a giant favor to have people out there promoting their expertise and getting credit for the work that they've put into writing a white paper or blog post, video blog, whatever it might be.
Yeah. No, I think that's you're spot on there, Austin. I think giving people the credit that they deserve and highlighting the experts within your firm. I mean, that's what this podcast is all about. This podcast is about helping visible experts or aspiring visible experts help to build their brand. So, no, these are actionable pieces. So let's turn to our next topic here. So, Austin, you and I, we did a webinar today. Mm-hmm. Know Thy Audience with Lee Fredrickson, and I thought that one went really well. We had a lot of great questions, which is a good way to engage with our audience. So, and this podcast episode is all about engagement. How do we engage with our audiences? And so, I think webinars are a really great way to do that. And you've seen a lot. I mean, you produce a lot of our webinars, all of our webinars actually. And just this year, we've decided to really up our game and do 2 webinars a month. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience doing webinars? What should folks watch out for? What are some of the common pitfalls? What have you seen?
Yeah, well, I feel like I've seen quite a bit now. Everything from, technology breaking down, the internet, kicking out at the, midway through the webinar, to me having the wrong notes in front of me and introducing the wrong person.
I think I was on one of the.
You were, yeah. John has literally seen in my professional career probably one of the most distasteful and sporadic moments of my entire life, as I was trying to introduce our managing partner, and I didn't have my notes in front of me, so I tried to do it on a whim, and it didn't go well. It did not go well at all.
Hopefully I'm not your bad luck charm.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. But when it comes to webinars, John, I think it's all just about being prepared. And
That's
I
right.
think a lot of people that are, if they're thinking about doing more webinars, or maybe they've just tested it out once or twice, I don't think you get the full scope of what webinars can be for your business down the road.
That's one thing that we're seeing is consistency.
Yeah.
And consistently doing things. You don't want to just we did one webinar, it didn't work, we're going to forget about it. Like, that's something you got to do over and over again.
Yeah, and we do webinars, like you said, all the time now.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just, it might be the topic that you selected. It might be the timing. Right now we're in the summer months, and attendance might be down. I mean, today we saw a little bit lower attendance than we normally do. It's a little bit below our benchmark, and that's okay. But you won't know those trends, and you won't see that kind of big picture if you've only done one webinar or 2 webinars in a year. So generally, I would recommend, if it is something that you're going to do, really lean in and go for it, and do at least once a month.
Well, the live aspect is one thing, but then after that, you can take that recording of the webinar and you can put it on your website, and that's what we do. We've got a library of on-demand webinars where you can take a look. So you can attend live, and that's obviously the benefit of that is you can ask questions, you can participate in polls. But then after the fact, if you can't attend it live, you can still access that content.
You're right, yeah. And, I mean, look what we're doing right now with this podcast episode, pulling from webinars.
That's right.
They end up being a great well for different content, and sometimes, there's been a couple of times where just questions that have been asked to us during a webinar has given us an opportunity to, once it's all said and done, circle back with that person through email and say, yes, you asked this question. Here's another thing that we've written. Here's a guide, and you give, again, that personal touch to a person who could be a big prospect. You never know. And so, my advice, circling back to your original question on webinars is, try to break it down and think about it. What is your checklist for before the webinar? What is your checklist for during the webinar, and what is it after the webinar? There's a bunch of things you should be thinking about.
So let's talk about that. And I know that you go through this, and so what are some of the things that before a webinar, someone who's putting it on, they should be thinking about?
Yeah, well, number one is make sure that you know the technology you're working with. There's a lot of applications you can be using out there. I would recommend that, whoever is running your webinars at least have a couple of test sessions and make sure that that people across the firm know how the technology works. I would also add, make sure there's a backup. If we're running a webinar and the person who knows all the technology is sick, you want to have someone there that knows how to use the technology so they keep the webinar going.
That's a good point.
So that's one thing, is know the technology. 2, you need to know your presenters. So, some presenters have different preferences. Some people are going to want like a physical printout of their presentation in front of them. Others are going to, want to show up 30 minutes ahead of time and prepare and run through everything. So I would say, before the webinar, know your technology, know your presenters, and make sure that everything is ready to go.
That's right. And what about during the webinar? Is it something where you can just click go and let the presenters go? Is there, what happens behind the scenes on a webinar?
Yeah, so just talking about what we do here at Hinge. So the way that we set up our technology and the way we set up our webinars is generally I have our presenters using one laptop, and I've as the administrator of the webinar, I've sent them presenting controls. So they're running their screens, they're running their own slides. That way I don't have to, they don't have to say, okay, next slide, please. They're doing it themselves. They're kind of running at their own pace. And off to the side, as like the administrator, I can see all the questions coming in, and I can feed those to you guys directly during the webinar, or I can save them after the webinar. Another thing I do is, if we've set out that it's going to be a 60-minute webinar, we want to make sure that the presenters are on track to kind of land the plane at the right time. Sometimes you might have to ask them to speed up. Sometimes they need to slow down.
That's right.
Today's webinar is actually a pretty good example where we kind of, I could tell you guys we're kind of running at a pretty fast pace, and so I think we realized halfway through we needed to slow down and kind of expound and take a few more questions. And so I think that the person who's in the room, kind of as the producer, needs to be thinking about those things. They need to be kind of making sure that there's a good flow going on during the webinar.
Mm-hmm. So what about after the webinar? Once you conclude the webinar, that's it, right? You don't have to do anything after the webinar?
I wish, no. No, that after the webinar, there's surprisingly a lot more to do than you would expect. Number one, it's always a good idea to send the recording out to everybody that registered. Now, different pieces of technology can do this for you in an automated way, but we tend to see that those messages don't look very good. So what we do is we actually download the actual video of the webinar recording. We embed it in our own email. We send it to that list of people that all registered for the email. So that, or for the webinar. So that's all. That's one big process. And then the other side of it is debriefing with some of the people that attended. You're going to have a lot of people that attended and asked a lot of questions. It's always good to follow up with them. I mean, sometimes I go and I add them on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
We start or continue a conversation that was happening during the webinar. I mean, this is everybody's dream, right? This is as much engagement as you could ever desire.
Yeah.
And if you were to just end a webinar and just leave it there, that's not what you want. You want to keep these conversations going, because ultimately we see webinars as kind of a middle of the funnel tool that people come and they're engaging with you, and they can be kind of pulled down further and further into your marketing funnel to a point where they can get a consultation, whatever. And so we have people responding to those consultation offers in our webinars as well. So that's another thing that all takes place after the webinar.
Well, yeah, I mean, it simulates a live engagement, too. So if you're speaking on stage, when you're done giving your presentation, you don't want to just sprint off stage, get in your car, and go to the airport.
No.
You want to stick around and see what questions there are and what conversations you have. So, no, I think that's great. And what about afterwards? So after you go and you send out all that stuff, you have those conversations, you got to sell to leadership. Why should we be doing webinars, right? Mm-hmm. What's the ROI of webinars? And so have you any thoughts on some of the different metrics that can be used to show, hey, we're gaining traction, we do have engagement, this is something that we should continue doing?
Yeah, like I said before, you're going to need to you're going to have to commit to webinars for a few months if you want to start tracking these trends. But, some general things that you can measure would be, number of registrants, number of attendees, and that gives you your attendance rate. Attendance rate, I think, can usually link back to hey, is this a pressing challenge that people care about? If people, the registration number is really, really high, but only a few people attend, what does that tell you about kind of what you're talking about? There's a lot of different ways you can think about it. Then there's the webinar, the engagement rate. So are people asking questions? Mm-hmm. Again, I think that the question asking portion is I think neglected in a lot of ways, in a lot of webinars that I've attended personally. Yeah. And I think it's a big miss for people because, again, And I have a special tip for this as well. If you are out there and you're running webinars, it's the conversation and the engagement that we all desire. And if you want that engagement, I would say start it as early into the webinar as you possibly can. So that's my tip. And sometimes you might have a feed question, something that you design on your own.
To elicit engagement.
To elicit engagement, right. Because people, like I said, a lot of people will attend webinars and people hosting it won't even give them the opportunity to ask questions.
That's right.
And again, I think that's a big miss. So what we do at Hinge, what we've discovered is, within that first 10-minute period, have somebody ask a question. Now, it could be a real question, and it's always great when it is a real question. Mm-hmm. But sometimes we have a feed question that I've written ahead of time that I'll say, hey, oftentimes people are wondering this, or I'll attribute a name to it. Hey, Karen, Karen is asking this question today. But what that does is it signals to the audience, oh, they actually want to answer our questions today. They're not just here to put on a show and to pitch us their product. They're actually here to engage with us.
Or this isn't pre-recorded. This is something that's actually happening live.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's always great. So back to your question about making a case to leadership and numbers. I mean, as you go through and the webinars are over, you're going to start seeing people that attend over and over again. I think that can be a signal that there's someone out there that is very interested in who you are as a firm, maybe the services that you offer. So there's some lead generation going on there, and then there's revenue per lead. I mean, obviously, the ideal dream is that someone hops off of your webinar and goes, yes, I want to take advantage of your services, which is why we give folks at Hinge the opportunity to do that by ending every webinar with a consultation offer. Hey, did this webinar on research apply to you? We'll do a free consultation. We'll talk to you about research. What was the consultation offer today?
Yeah, the consultation offer was for a research consultation, and the topic of the webinar was about how brand research drives success, and we told lots of stories about some of our clients who've had successful rebrands as a result of doing brand studies and research. And the consultation was really to see, does that make sense for you? How could research help your brand? And so hopefully we have some more conversations.
Yeah, and so that's as kind of the overseer of all webinars here. Whenever we get a new person taking advantage of that consultation, I definitely put that as one win in the webinar bucket.
Awesome. Well, Austin, I think this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. I know Kelly's out this week, and we're have a gap in our guest schedule. So I think that these are really some actionable pieces of advice that our audience can take away, and hopefully many of them get started with webinars. I think that it's been a great channel for us. It's a great channel to demonstrate expertise and to engage with your audience. Like you said, it's a middle of the funnel technique, so it helps bridge that gap between the top and the bottom. So if you're listening to this podcast and you found it valuable, please rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and we'll be back at it next week. All right, we'll talk to you then.